Alright, what's going on everyone? Sorry I've been off here for so long. I've just been busy with Instagram and kids and everything like that. Today I wanted to make a video for you that talks about the 3 things that I wish I'd known when I first started Photoshop. Now probably like a lot of you open up Photoshop and you get to a pretty good level pretty quick by knowing a few of the buttons. And for me, there was a lot of things that I was doing in Photoshop for a really long time that were very inefficient. And today I want to share with you a few of those things that I wish I'd known sooner that would have saved me a lot of headache. And hopefully, by showing them to you, I'll be able to save you a lot of headaches in the future. So let's dive right into it.
Number 1.
Alright, now the first thing was definitely using smart objects. I would never use them. I would just use a rasterized image and I would get to a certain point and realize I didn't like it, and there was no way to change any of the settings or anything I've done. So let me show you one of the things I would do all the time. Let's say I was making a shadow for this car here, or maybe I was adding some headlights. Now if I wanted to add a little bit of a blur to this shadow, which is something you would normally do, I go to File, Gaussian Blur, and I try and set it to a blur that I like, maybe something like that. I'm just going over this quick. You could spend all the time in the world working on shadows. So I'd go through this, maybe add a filter here, add a little bit of a gradient fade on the car, just something like that. But let's say I get to a certain point and I do not like the blur on that. Well, I have to be able to ensure that I got enough undos to go back. And in this case, I do, so I'm lucky. But what if I didn't? What could I have done differently? Well, I could have converted this to a smart object right off the bat. And that way, when I go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and I added a blur, I can make all the adjustments I want, and it's gonna show up right here in my smart filters. So at any point, I could just double click on that, and maybe I could add a little less, maybe I could add a little bit more. Definitely a great tip. So that is using smart objects. They're useful in so many different circumstances. I highly recommend you start using them. Hey, I just want to jump in here really quick and remind you that if you're liking these tips, help a creator out. Hit that like button. Consider subscribing to my channel because you know it helps. You know it helps.
Number 2.
Alright, the next instance was clone stamping. Now when I first started out with clone stamping, I used to just clone stamp right onto the layer. So let's say I was trying to change this thing here. I'll go to my clone stamp, make a selection, and I would just clone stamp right over this here to get rid of it. And sure, that's fine, I did that really quick. But what if you wanted to change something about your clone stamp? Okay, and this is another instance where if you had used a smart object, it's not going to allow you to clone stamp on your smart object. You'd have to rasterize it. And then if you want to make any changes, you would be basically hooped. Okay, then for a while what I started doing was I would make a duplicate of this and then I would rasterize it. And that way, if I made any mistakes while I'm clone stamping, I could always go back to the original, make another copy, and redo my clone stamp. And that was extremely inefficient, and I thought there has to be a better way. And it turns out there is definitely an easier way. And all it has to do is, if you have your smart object on here, is just add another layer above it, and you can clone stamp. By hitting this, you can sample current and below, you can sample all layers, or you can just sample the current layer. Obviously sampling the current layer isn't going to work that well because it's a blank layer, but if you sample current and below, you're going to be able to clone stamp the ones below. And if you had a very specific composition you were working on, you could always clip this so it stays on this. We're just working on one single layer here, so this doesn't really matter. But anyway, so now I could do a clone stamp, and I could clone stamp this out, not being very careful here, like this. And let's say I accidentally went like this, and later on I hate this part that I accidentally made. You can just use your eraser tool right on the clone stamp, and you can erase out the parts of the clone stamp there. Super helpful.
Number 3.
Okay, now the next one was the dodge and burn tool. Now this was a little bit of an evolution. At the very start, what I would do is I would make a copy of my original layer so I could always go back to it if I wanted to. And I would rasterize this layer here already a big mistake. If you remember back to my making a smart object, so you can always undo changes. And I would go to the dodge and burn tool over here, say I want to do some burning here, and just going quick here with my burn tool, and just turn this down a little bit, just for an example here. Now go in, add some dodging and burning. Now, what happens if you don't like where you've dodged and burned? Well, are you going to use your eraser tool in this case? No, you're not, because you're going to be actually just erasing the part of that. Okay, so this was a little bit of an evolution, like I said. So my next strategy for dodging and burning was to add a new layer and then add a 50% gray, like this. Okay, and now what you can do is do it as overlay, and you can again use your dodge and burn tool on here. So like that, to do a dodge. Oops. Now, but the problem is this is, again, if you use the eraser tool, what you're doing is you're actually erasing the gray overlay that you put on here. So that's not helpful because you can't redo that spot. So if you had a very minor adjustment you're trying to work on, you're not going to be able to do an adjustment in that spot. Now, like I said, evolution. What do I do now? I use an additional layer like this, and I clip it, and you change this to soft light. And now you just use your normal brush tool with your black and white, reset these, and when it's on black, you're performing the exact same function here. We're adding some darkness in here, and we're doing burning, and then if you switch this over to the whites, you're going to be adding some highlights, maybe some dodging here in the cheeks, like this. And the beautiful part about this is if you don't like something you did, then you made all this right here. Again, you can use your eraser tool and you can erase all the parts you don't like, and the layer is completely transparent and blank, and you can just keep going. You can make small adjustments, you can come back to them later, you can do anything you want with this method. And this is where I am now. And I just want to throw in here that if you know a better method, I'm all ears. Leave a comment down below, and we're all trying to learn together here. Okay, for the few of you that made it to the end of this video, I just want to let you know that you're awesome. Go through the rest of your day remembering that you're awesome because you made it to the end of some stranger's video on the internet. Have a good one.